Welcome to a special edition of the Darden Admissions Podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to share the latest installment from our ongoing Faculty Spotlight series, a series we call Office Hours, featuring Shane Dikolli. Shane is a member of the accounting faculty here at the Darden School of Business. I recently caught up with him to talk more about his background, what brought him to Darden, what he enjoys about teaching accounting, his Darden Worldwide course in Australia, and so much more. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. And as always, if this conversation is helpful for you, please like this episode and subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an update. Remember, you can always check the episode description for links to Darden blogs, social channels, and more. Now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Professor Shane Dikolli. Shane, great to see you.
Hi, Brett. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's great to be so close to the start of school. It's hard to believe. Launch week will be just a couple of weeks away. I think August 10th, first day.
Oh, it's come so quickly. It's come so quickly.
Yeah. I know. Well, it's great to see you. First question's always the same. Tell us a little bit more about you and your background.
Yeah, sure. I was born and raised in the working class suburbs of Perth, Australia, which is the furthest place on earth from here. My father was an Albanian refugee, came to Australia with no money, no relatives in Australia, but got into the Albanian community and had an arranged marriage, which was quite common at the time. And I grew up with three brothers. The three of them were all gifted at sport. I wasn't. I tended to like academics a lot more. And so I went to high school and did accounting at high school, and I really loved that. And so I joined a public accounting firm immediately after graduating from high school and did my undergraduate degree part-time at Curtin University. And I was the first person in my family to go to university. And before I finished my degree, I got a management accounting job at Curtin University, and that led into some part-time teaching by accident almost. They needed someone, and I just happened to be available. And that ended up starting an academic career. I did a teaching exchange in Canada, met my wife. We got married 2 years after meeting, and we have two children. After that, I got a PhD and then moved to the University of Texas at Austin. And I was there for 6 years. I then moved to Duke University for 12 years. And I've been at Darden now for 8 years. So short version, Perth boy, accounting nerd, teacher by accident, and still very, very grateful for the path that I've had.
Well, I love the short version. That's it.
I should have led with that, right?
Well, what got you to Darden? Obviously, you've been at Darden for a little while now.
Yeah.
What led you here?
My current colleague, Luann Lynch, she had heard I had a popular course at Duke, and she reached out to me and had asked if I might be interested in the case method. She thought that would be really a good fit for me. And I resisted for several years because my kids were still at high school and I didn't want to move them again. But once they went off to college, I looked into it. I sat in on a class. Elena Lutskina was teaching this private equity class. And within minutes, I knew that's where I was supposed to be. And sometimes the fit is obvious. And for me, it was. And so when I left that class, I went to Luann. I said, where do I sign up? It's just it's the right place for someone like me.
What is it about that class experience and seeing the case method? Elena is obviously she's a much beloved faculty member and kind of no nonsense in the classroom. But what did you enjoy about that class?
Oh, what I loved about it was that the students were well prepared and they knew that they had to engage and ask questions. And it really comes out of this philosophy that Bob Bruner, former dean here, he has a book on this and it's available free online. It's called Ask Often, Tell Seldom. And so the instructor is not there to tell students information. The instructor is there to facilitate conversation so that the students can learn and generate their own learning from the floor. So the more I ask questions, the more that students discover for themselves. And that type of learning is far more embedded. I also have adopted another one of Bob Bruner's insights, which is that education's about knowledge, skill, and wisdom. And in an undergraduate program, good undergraduate programs will teach the knowledge and skill, but it's in an MBA program through case method that I think that wisdom gets accumulated. And it's not just from someone telling you, it's you have to actually experience it. And that's what the case method does.
I love that. And, it's obviously a big conversation these days with AI coming in to the educational experience of like, what is school really about? What is the value of school? That wisdom,
Yes,
it seems like a big
absolutely.
part of the equation.
Absolutely. It's not something you can read in a textbook or that AI can teach you. It's something that you collect from having conversations with your classmates and generating differences of opinion that you can judge and change your thinking going forward.
Um, Folks are always curious. We get this question from a prospective student almost every week. It feels like, how in the world do you teach accounting through the
Yeah.
case method? How does that work?
Yeah, I was a little skeptical at first as well, to be honest. But honestly, Luann Lynch, my colleague, and actually all my colleagues in accounting here at Darden, have just figured out that it's not about trying to get the students to prepare the numbers themselves and be experts at presenting the number or preparing, constructing the numbers themselves. It's more about how do you interpret the numbers, and so we certainly have conversations about the numbers, but they're not the driving force of the class. It's more about, well, here's what the numbers are telling us. How do we interpret that and make good decisions going forward? And so it's surprising that I think a lot of people would expect that you'd spend most of the 85 minutes in class just working through numbers, but it's surprising how little time we actually do spend on constructing and more on interpreting. So it's really about um, conversations of what it means for making good decisions.
A lot of students don't have background in accounting. This is another point of concern for people as they look at an MBA program. They worry, oh, I don't have this particular course, like experience with this course or this particular topic. Can I do this? What would you tell
Mm.
folks who haven't taken an accounting course before?
Yeah, and one, you're not alone. There's a lot of students that come into the class who've never taken accounting in their lives, and so there's no need to panic. Uh, there are structured ways that we work with students who have not had the background. One is we tend to give them technical notes that they can read on their own. Um, Secondly, we have learning team structures so that students get to meet students from other sections. So we have the section structure at Darden where you're in a section with roughly 70 students in the full-time program at least for all of your core courses, but your learning team is across different sections. And so you get to meet students from other sections and have meetings outside of class to talk about the case information. And then in class, you go to class with some questions that you're still not sure about that you're ready to ask. And then by asking those questions, you're prompting your classmates to join in and help out. So even though we might have CPAs who are qualified, and one thing I really love about what Darden does is that we do not exempt any CPA from accounting courses. They have to be in the class as well. And so the instructors, we really try to embrace that. And where we need to, we bring them into the conversation. But at the same time, as instructors, we know when to uh, ensure that people who don't have the accounting background have an opportunity to speak up and tell us what they're seeing in the numbers. So it works really well. There's just such a great mix and diversity of experiences in accounting in the classroom that means that the people who don't have accounting are brought up to speed.
Yeah, we also have some pre-matriculation resources for students. If you just even want to begin to develop some of the language or familiarity with concepts you're going to see, we have resources for students across all of our programs that you
Yeah.
can engage with prior to the start of school.
Yep. Yeah. The executive program, the part-time program, and they have learning team structures as well. They just don't have the the multiple sections like they do. Well, executive does, but part-time doesn't. The full-time program has multiple sections as well.
Well, Shane, I'm curious about one of your electives that you teach, strategic costing. I've sort of been curious about this course because I know it's popular. You've had students take that course from across Darden's MBA programs. What is it about?
Yeah, so it's a course that I developed because we do a little bit of costing in the introductory course, in the core course across all the programs. And we don't have a course that sort of takes that another step. So we tend to focus on fairly simple decisions with the costing information about how much product should be produced, or should you outsource a product, and so what's the relevant costs, and those types of decisions. But then there needs to be decisions that are made even more strategically, that costs have a factor in those decisions. So, for example, um, understanding how much a customer costs is not something that we would see in an introductory course, but in a more advanced course, we look at the costs in those types of environments, and then we also look at costs in different types of industries as well. So healthcare costs are huge at the moment in terms of understanding the importance of them, and so we have some cases on healthcare in strategic costing as well. So the other thing that I really like about the course that I don't know if we have too many other examples, but I have the students bring a vignette based on a costing uh, scenario that they've encountered either in their work practice or work experience, or if they've encountered just in life. And so they write it up, 3 paragraphs, bring it to class, present it to the other students in teams, and then I get the students to vote on which vignette they want to see more of, and then it eventually gets to a point where the final projects are team based, and the top 6 or 7 projects go on to another level, and then the students present a final video recording just to make sure that it's them that has prepared it rather than uh, uh, written up by say AI. And the video recording uh, then gives an overview of how they might use costing to address the issue that they've raised, and it's just some really interesting outcomes, and certainly lots of potential for writing up cases going forward. So it's a course that has everything that I really enjoy teaching about.
How do you see this course fitting into? I mean, you talked about sort of maybe where it sits and sort of maybe filling a gap or something that people haven't had a chance to engage with. But within the overall like curriculum, if somebody takes this course, what could you imagine them doing in their career later on that sort of leverages maybe some of the things they thought about in this course?
Anything inside the firm, and so any decisions that are made inside the firm, using internal information. So costing information generally isn't externally disclosed, not at the detailed level that we look at to make internal decisions. And the reason why is because it's proprietary, and so companies don't want to give away secrets like that. So the internal decision making, and that type of decision that's being made is feeds into other courses. So, for example, strategy, for example, marketing, and so they need to understand the financial implications, and finance, of course, as well. So they need to understand the financial implications, and costing helps provide some information for those decisions.
I want to talk about another course that you lead that I know you're very passionate about. You have led Darden Worldwide course as well as global residency to Australia, and that's people that put together. You're from Perth, Australia, and
Mhm.
when I first thought about this course, I think it used to go to Sydney and Melbourne, and then when you got involved with the course, I think it shifted a little bit in terms of where the students go now. So tell us a little bit more about this global course to Australia.
Yeah. So we've gone 8 times now, and 220 students have been on these eight courses, and the most that we can take is 34 at a time. Just partly because buses, size of buses, and also uh, when we go on corporate visits, they often don't have a space big enough for more than say 34 people. So it got started purely out of a conversation that I had in the hallway with Mark Johnson, who was uh, the head of strategy here at Darden for a longest time now, works at the university. And I said, Mark, what would it take for me to have an Australia course? And he said, well, let's see what we can do. And before I knew it, they were enrolling students in 2020, back in 2020, into a course for Australia. And actually, it was in the fall of 2019. So we went in January 2020 and got back just before things sort of broke out. So that was the first course we did, was Sydney, Melbourne. And I just leaned on some good friends that I have in both cities. And I thought I'd go to the two biggest cities. It seemed logical. There seemed to be more opportunities there for students to see big companies have corporate visits. And then over time, it's evolved where I've decided that students should see Perth, and it's a really a wonderful city, my hometown, on the other side of the world. And I don't think there's a single student that have been to Perth that has been disappointed. It's got amazing beaches. It's got a mining culture, fly in, fly out. Workers go up into the northwest of Western Australia, and so we learn a lot about how um, Perth contributes a lot to the Australian economy, and of course the whole course is about how you design or have business with Australia, in Australia, and with Australians, and so um, Perth plays a very important role there. So we go Perth to Sydney now, and Sydney's the pretty city, and lots to do there, of course, and we've got good contacts in both places. So yeah, it's just the best thing I do at Darden, I think, and I love teaching accounting. So there's no accounting in the course down to Australia. It's all about learning about doing business in Australia.
For folks who don't know much about the Australian economy, how would you describe it? I mean, it's a huge place,
Mm.
enormous.
Yeah, mostly mining is the big thing. And that comes out of Western Australia. And I would say education's quite big there in terms of they export education to Asia, um, and then healthcare is big in Australia as well as financial services. Um, and yeah, the resources economy is the thing that really drives the Australian outcomes, I think. And it's a lucky, wealthy country, I think, and a lot of things going for it. A lot of the culture is such that people look out for each other, and so I really enjoy that about Australia, and I really enjoy seeing it through the eyes of the American students who um, are really quite taken back and inspired by what they see there. It looks familiar, but by the end of the week, they know that they've learnt some things about Australia that they could potentially, hopefully, implement or interact with their careers going forward.
Culturally, undoubtedly, when people go, they probably feel like, "Oh, this feels familiar," but there's, assuredly some key differences between US
Yeah.
American culture and Australian culture. What are some of the things that jump out to students over the course of the week?
Yeah, I think they're a little surprised at how good the coffee is in Australia, actually. And the interesting thing about coffee is that people take coffee breaks. So they're in the office, they decide they want to go and have coffee. So they go to a coffee shop and sit down and have coffee, and they might talk business, but it's a very common thing. It's not you go to Starbucks and then you just get your coffee and move on. And it's you sit down and enjoy a coffee. And I always say I don't drink coffee in Australia; I sip it because it tastes so good. So that's one thing. Second thing I would say is mateship. It's a thing that every Australian knows and they understand, and you look out for your mates, you never let your mates down. Um, I tell the students that they find that a little hard to believe when I tell them that in Charlottesville. They see it in Australia. Quite often, some of the people that we visit are mates of mine, and they can see that it's a lifelong bond that you build. So I just think that they're two things that surprise the students when and it's not something you can sort of tell people in Charlottesville or that they necessarily see as tourists. But but they see it when they're on the immersion. And so the advantage that I have, of course, is that I lived in Australia and grew up there, so I can share these experiences and point out where things might look a little off, but they're actually things that are consistent with the Australian culture.
A question from the Q&A, education as an export, or how does that work within the Australian
Yeah,
economy? Is that people
yeah,
coming to Australia for education?
yep. And also, Australian universities setting up campuses in Asia as well. So when I was first at Curtin University, we used to do quite a bit of teaching in Malaysia, Hong Kong, Singapore as well, and uh, so we would go up for a week and teach a week long course, and I'm not quite sure how they structure it now, but it's a big part of what Australia does, and then full fee paying students that come to Australia as well. So education for Australia is relatively cheap, certainly by US standards, I would say. But for anyone that's not Australian, that they would pay what might be regarded as sort of American full fee paying tuition.
How do you think about designing a week? I mean, you only have, 5-ish days, of actual time with the students to go and visit companies, have
Yeah.
activities. How do you narrow in on what you'd like to do?
Yeah, so we try to do 2 visits a day, corporate visits a day, and we might do a cultural visit as well. And so cultural visits are fairly easy to do because Sydney Opera House is it's a no-brainer. The Perth Optus Stadium is a no-brainer, and then seeing the animals, of course, the unique animals in Australia. That's something we need to do as well. And then outside of the cultural visits, we try to pick on industries that are diverse. So we don't just look at financial services. And I didn't mention before, but tourism obviously is huge in Australia. And so we try to look at industries that support tourism as well. So we'll go to a winery. We'll go to sports is a big part of Australian culture, and so we'll go to some sort of sporting event. We try to go to a sporting event, and we visit mining companies. We visit financial services companies. We visit telecommunications company, not for profit. In fact, that's probably the most um, uh, visit that the students enjoy the most. We visit the Clontarf Foundation, which is a an organisation that looks after uh, Indigenous young men who are s- people that struggle to fit into society or have traditionally struggled to fit into society, and the foundation looks out for them and makes sure that they go to school, provides incentives to go to school by offering them sporting outcomes, and then they finish their schooling and then they can transition into society and have far better outcomes than historically has happened. And so the students really feel that experience. And I'm actually teaching a case on that today to the international uh, students who have come to start it out in the full time program. So I'm very excited about that. Yeah, so we pick organisations that are different to what they might see in the US. Again, they look familiar, but there's something that's a little different about them that they feel like they learned something new.
I had a chance to go on a global residency to Ireland back in March. I still think about that. I mean, I was just there as a supporting staff member. I still think about that course because you learn so much about the location. You learn before you
Yeah.
go, right? There are all these student presentations that happen about different elements of the location. We learned about history and culture and sports and, various economic challenges. Like there's a big housing shortage in Ireland right now. We learned about all of that before we went. But then even as you go, you're learning a ton. You're hearing what the companies are talking about, or maybe we went and visited some governmental organizations
Yeah.
all over there, and they were focused on economic development in Ireland. And like, I mean, I still talk to people all the time about Ireland and what I learned and I was just there as a staff member, which is to
Mhm.
me says a lot about the learning experience.
Oh yeah, yeah. We met with the Lord Mayor of Perth this past trip in March, and that was just fantastic. And it made me wonder, maybe I'll eventually move back to Australia and run to be the Lord Mayor of Perth or something like that. That would be just a lot of fun.
Well, from what our students have shared with me, you certainly have a lot of enthusiasm for Perth. I think they have
Yeah,
enjoyed
yeah,
being there with someone who is so proud of Perth and all that it offers. You were mentioning, I think one of the things that's also really cool is the level of access that students get. We were talking before we started about some of the planning you're doing for this course you're leading in October.
yeah.
And it's amazing the level. I mean, the leadership folks that people get to connect with on these courses.
Oh, yeah. So one of our good friends, my wife and I, we worked with him in Amsterdam back in the 90s. His name's Craig Dunn. At KPMG, he was at the time, and we were. But Craig has gone on and built an amazing career, and he's now the chairman of the board at Telstra, uh, which is a telecommunications company, the largest in Australia. And he has been just incredible for us. He was also the chairman of the Australian Ballet at one point, and so we got to visit him at the Sydney Opera House. And but at Telstra, he's organised visits with the CEO and with members of the top management team. So, and that's just hearing the interactions between Craig and the top management team, and how those interactions occur is just a great learning experience you could not possibly get in a classroom. And this pastime or coming up, we've got some visits that we're currently in the midst of organising, which could include uh, deputy chairman of one of the largest mining companies in the world, actually, and so we're very excited about that. But we haven't finalised that yet, so I can't really say too much. But in general, we tend to have CEOs. So we've got CEO of the Clontarf Foundation that we speak with, or people who are fairly high up in the organisation, and that just gives a very strategic perspective on the organisation. But at the same time, a lot of these people have worked themselves up from sort of grassroots level, so they know the organisation really well. We visit with Qantas, for example, and the people that have been there for years, and so we get to visit the operations centre, and we have an amazing visit with Qantas as well.
Thank you for sharing that. I want to transition now to talk a little bit about your research. You've done a lot of work focused on CEOs.
Yeah.
What attracted you to thinking about CEOs and how they're perceived out in the world?
I just think that they sit at the intersection of power and information and accountability, and they make really highly visible decisions. And so, given that accounting is language of business and it's used to make decisions, then the key decision maker in an organization is always going to be of interest to me. Um, and so, it CEOs tend to have a very rich uh, amount of data around them as well. And so you can uh, research topics such as how they're compensated, how boards design incentives for them, how they interpret the signals from the CEO, just what performance measures are being used, how much they're weighted, who are they evaluated against. So there's lots of questions that I'm interested in that I've actually worked on, and I think going forward, I'll continue to do so. I just think it's just a really fascinating area of research.
Are there any particularly interesting insights you've gleaned over the course of the research that you've done? I mean, CEOs,
Yeah,
people have a lot of feelings about CEOs, maybe some
yeah.
not very positive.
The, the, the biggest thing is, are they overpaid, right? And so there's certainly two very distinct streams of ideas on whether they're overpaid. And so there's obviously this the one stream that says that they get much too much relative to the rest of the organization or employees. And there's also another stream of research that says that given that the market for CEOs is very thin, you would expect the prices to be high, and for the level of responsibility and to be able to retain someone who makes really good decisions for an organization that adds value, then you need to pay them really high amounts of money. So that's certainly a topic that comes up almost in every paper that I look at, or a question that comes up: are the CEOs overpaid? The most interesting insight I think that I've gotten from all the papers that I've worked on is it looks at CEO integrity, and so I'm really interested in the idea of how character and the behavior and personality of the CEO shapes the way that incentives are designed for them. And so one of the things that we discovered was in measuring CEO integrity, we decided to look at shareholder letters and the number of excuses or explanations that CEOs give in shareholder letters. And then we compared them across the economy. And we found that CEOs that over explained, we made an assumption that they were of lower integrity because they didn't honor their word. And they had to over explain as a result because the market didn't trust them. And then the CEOs who under-explained tended to be of higher integrity. And sure enough, we found that the CEOs with low integrity tended to have higher audit fees, meaning that the auditors didn't trust them completely, and so they had to do more work, and so the audit fees were higher. We also found that CEOs with high integrity tended to have higher future financial performance, so a year uh, more than a year out. So, and we put that down to, although we didn't test this in the paper, we put that down to um, culture, because there's other research that shows that firms that have stronger culture tends to have higher future financial performance. And so if you've got a CEO with high integrity, they tend to be setting tone at the top that suggests that um, culture will play an important role in the workforce.
Question from the Q&A. What are your thoughts about, tying CEO compensation to firm performance?
Yeah.
Could create some potentially problematic
Uh,
incentives.
every every firm does it, and it's just a question of how much, right? So, how much weight do you put on that firm performance? And I think it depends a lot on the incentives that the firm is trying to create. So, if the firm wants to create incentives, for example, to grow, then the weight on the bottom line will be lower and the weight on the top line will be much higher because they're trying to grow the firm fast. So yeah, it just depends on what incentives the board wants to create. And Craig Dunn in the DWC that we do to Australia is just great to ask questions of about how he thinks about designing incentives. They're usually very candid answers too that he gives.
Anything you're working on right now related to CEOs? I know you always have some research going.
Yeah, so I'm really interested in this idea of relative performance evaluation, and so a paper that we're working on is very early stages at the moment. Is how powerful CEOs. So again, this is a trait or a characteristic of the CEO, how it might shape that power shapes the design and the disclosure of relative performance evaluation in the compensation contract. So, relative performance evaluation is meant to filter out the non controllable factors so that if the whole industry rises because of favorable conditions, then the CEO shouldn't get the full credit for that, right? So, that's an example of where CEOs being overpaid for good luck. Um, so relative performance valuation is really important for filtering out those effects. And so we're looking to see the extent to which powerful CEOs drive the decision to choose the peers that they're evaluated against, and how transparently that choice of peers is disclosed. And so we've we're trying to use some AI uh, to determine whether or not firms are using RPE. They're supposed to disclose it, but what we're finding is that there are firms that don't say they're using RPE, but it clearly seems as though they are. And AI is helping us detect that. So that's really a fascinating part of the project as well. So I'm not sure where it's going to end up yet, but we're in the early stages of it.
Interesting question here in the Q&A. With accounting processes,
Yeah.
advent, obviously AI coming on, automation of analytics, all this kind of stuff. Like, where do you see the role of the CEO, general manager changing relative to some of these accounting processes? Now that we have all these technologies are becoming a bigger and bigger part of
Yeah.
their work stream.
Yes, for sure. I think that they're surrounding themselves with people who are knowledgeable in the area, um, and I think we're seeing a shift to the top management team starting to attract people who have the expertise to be able to advise the CEO. I don't think the CEOs themselves are necessarily taking on extra training to become experts themselves, but they're surrounding themselves with the right people to make the decisions that are going to benefit the firm. I know we saw some evidence of that with Telstra, the telecommunications firm in Australia, on in March, and I'm very curious to see in October when we go back, just how far they've evolved with their thinking on AI and how the CEO makes decisions based on the expertise and advice they're getting.
It does feel like AI relative to sort of accounting, as people think of it, like these are rules based, this kind of thing. Like it is a technology that could have a lot of application potential disruption for traditional practices around accounting. Although you mentioned earlier about the importance of judgment and wisdom, how do you see
Yeah,
all of that?
yeah. So that's the way that I see it. I think that the construction of the numbers are going to become a little more uh, generated by AI, but I think that there's no doubt about that. Um, However, there needs to be some type of vetting to just to ensure that the AI's gotten it right, for one thing. So there needs to be some understanding of how those numbers were put together, and also, like I said earlier, the biggest thing for me with accounting is how you judge the numbers and make decisions going forward, and so you could train an AI to do that sort of thing as well, but at the same time, there are some contextual factors that a human decision maker will understand that AI won't at the time, and so I think ultimately it's going to be a partnership, a thought partnership. So an AI, a human interacting with a decision maker interacting with AI to arrive at the best possible decision. But I don't think AI is going to replace accounting by any means, and certainly not the outcomes of accounting.
Yeah, that sort of context piece I think is a really important point. We've been getting a lot of perspective student questions about the value of an MBA at this time, right? Because there's some hot takes out there. Because
Yeah, sure.
if school is just about knowledge transfer, well, doesn't this machine know everything, right? So then what is it about? I think Darden has a really interesting story there.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't think it's knowledge transfer at all, or even skill transfer. It's much more about collection of wisdom in the classroom, and then what to do with that wisdom and judgment going forward and making better decisions.
We've got a question here. Maybe something that you mentioned, teaching through the case method that really resonating with you when you came and visited and sat in on Elena's class. People sort of sometimes ask case method versus lecture style. Where
Yeah.
you see as the principal benefits of learning through the case method? I know we've been talking at it, but we've got a direct question here in the Q&A. It might be interesting for people to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. So I do think the lecture method could, to some extent, be replaced by AI because you're looking to understand something specific, and you can ask questions directly of the lecturer, in this case, the AI, and so I'm just not sure that you get to hear the different points of view that you would in a case method classroom, and I think that's really key. When you go out into a business meeting, there's going to be multiple viewpoints sitting around a table, and you don't want to be surprised by someone having a very different opinion. And I think in every single class that students take at Darden, there's going to be a diversity of viewpoints, and you get to learn from that. And you get to learn to understand how to respond to those different viewpoints and how to manage the ambiguity that is in the context, but also the ambiguity that comes out of the different opinions around the room. And so I just think you get so much more out of a case method discussion in terms of changing the way that you might think and the way that you might react to other people's way of thinking. And so that's the thing that makes a difference, I think, relative to a lecture situation.
And so folks who are obviously spending some time on our website and asking, Darden is described as a transformational learning experience.
Yeah.
Case method sort of pushes students to be an active participant in their learning experience in that way. In your opinion, you obviously been at Darden for a while. You've worked with students, seen them at the start of their program, maybe into their second year, close to graduation. Where do you see the growth? Where do you see the change for students typically happening?
I think it's in the level of thinking that they have. I, I I think that when they first come to Darden and they start to take classes, they approach it the way they might approach their undergraduate degree. So they're very diligent about preparing for class and then coming to class and having some questions that they want to ask. But then I think as they evolve through their degree, their level of thinking becomes more strategic, and so they can anticipate some of the viewpoints or some of the questions that might come up, and so you're almost thinking two steps ahead rather than how do I address this one question and move on to the next. So it's at just at a different level of thinking, and I think that that's what uh, business calls for, right? So, in trying to solve business problems, there's people sitting around a room with different viewpoints, and they're trying to understand how to move forward. And I think that having that level of thinking, that strategic level of thinking, that forward level of thinking, using accounting numbers, using the information that's available to make the best possible decisions, just leads to a much uh, more value-added outcome, I think.
Well, I think about just the sheer amount of practice people get with, engaging in those conversations. I mean, you do that hundreds of
Absolutely.
times.
Absolutely. Yeah, literally hundreds of times. Like you do 100 cases is it in the first year? Or
It's
by the third quarter of the first year in the
yeah, yeah,
full-time
definitely.
program.
There's a
Yeah.
there's a party for it, so,
Yeah.
celebration.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a good reward to have because they've worked really hard to that point and they have evolved. Yeah, and the nice thing is in the second year, they can just pick and choose the topics they're interested in and just really build on that level of thinking as well. They can go on a Darden Worldwide course, which I think just changes the context completely because you get to see it in practice in another country, and you're getting to talk to leaders and how they make decisions in their everyday lives. So I think that's all part of the transformation. It's not just class after class. It's really the classes, the experiences outside of class as well, and then these worldwide courses. I think just make a compelling case that adds up to something much bigger.
And you mentioned just in the worldwide course, all the different companies you get to visit, but that's also happening across the cases that you're reading. You're reading about all kinds of
Absolutely.
different companies, different kinds of industries, different kinds of problems, global companies, US-based companies. I mean, all kinds of different firms. Just the sheer exposure is, and if you're benefiting from your classmates' experience too, which happens to have those dimensions to it as well.
Yeah, and one of the other things too that I think is really important in the case method is that we tend to bring it back to a decision. Certainly in accounting, I can't really speak for the other courses, but my understanding of the other courses is that very similar outside of accounting too, where it's decision focused. And so you've got a case context, you've got ambiguous information, and then you need to construct some numbers to glean some insights that can be focused on a decision. And I think that's something that you don't really get in a lecture. A lecture is just all this information just being thrown at you that you hopefully try to retain, and you might have to regurgitate for an exam. But yeah, in the case method, you're really trying to build to a decision, which is what you would do in practice.
Yeah, I've enjoyed we occasionally have virtual mock classes, and, a faculty member will ask one of the students who's attended, "What decision should be made here?" And sometimes the student will say, "I think we could do this or this or this," and they say, "No, no. What decision do you think?" I mean, they really push the students that you can't can pursue 3 or 4 different possibilities. It's really gotta be a decision, and then people react to that and sort of work through it. But I've appreciated the faculty sort of pushing students on that. I think that's how the real world works.
Oh yeah, most definitely. Yeah.
Got a question here about some of the work that you do with performance metrics,
Yeah.
and so in your experience, where do companies most often go wrong when using financial or business targets to motivate management teams? Do you have any thoughts along that?
Um, I don't usually see where they go wrong in the sense that I don't do a lot of field work where I go to investigate and look at things that didn't go right versus things that did go right. I tend to look at what firms actually do in terms of their disclosures. And so I'll look at the weights that they put on different measures, and I'll look at the way that they've designed the structure of the contract for the CEO, who they've chosen as peers. And it's hard to say that they've gone wrong. I guess the closest thing to it is that I've been working on a paper called risk filtering, where there's at least in theory an optimal level of risk filtering. So how much risk do you take away from the CEO, the CEO's performance? And we see a lot of deviations away from what would be the theoretically optimal level. But again, I'm not sure that you could say that they've gone wrong. It could be very strategic. So they might be, for example, trying to retain the CEO, and in other words, taking away more risk than what they probably should be taking away. But they might be doing that because they want to retain the CEO. They think the CEO is the best thing that they've ever had, and in terms of adding value for the company. And so, yeah, I'm very cautious about saying firms are doing it wrong rather than, well, they might be doing it strategically for a reason. It's like earnings management, right? So we see a lot of firms manage earnings in a way that, using accounting techniques, in a way that some people might construe as being uh, you're hiding something, you're trying to sabotage something, or you're doing something wrong. Um, but that's one interpretation. Another interpretation is that they're doing it strategically, and maybe they know that they're going to have um, really good outcomes at the end of the year. So they're trying to save some money for the end of the year, or something like that. So they could be they're trying to signal to the market that their performance is very strong. So they're managing earnings, and that's the way they signal to the market. So it's 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 not necessarily that they're doing something wrong. It's that they're doing something strategic.
Another question from the audience, may have some future CEOs
Mhm.
here in this group, and so they were curious, like, if somebody's, thinking about that kinda role, something, that they should be thinking about when it comes to their own performance measurement, or anything that if you were coaching somebody, this is something that you should think about?
To become a CEO.
Well, if you are let's say you got a
Oh,
role, you're coming in as a CEO, that you're thinking about that contract and how you're gonna be assessed and your performance is gonna be measured, what would you encourage that person to think about?
um, I I would say that you'd want to signal to the board that you're in this for the long term, and so you'd want to ask for equity in the firm, and the ways to identify what equity that you should have is a way of signaling to the board. So I think that's very important. Um, and choosing the metrics that really matter to the firm. And so the choice of measures, I think, is important. So having earnings-based measures suggests that you're going to care about not just the top line, but you're going to care about expenses as well. And earnings being revenues minus expenses. And then the other thing is choosing the peers in a way that signals to the board that you're serious about trying to aspire to be better than what the firm is now. So if you choose aspirational peers, that's a way of signaling to the board that's where you think the company's going to go. So yeah, there's lots of choices that a CEO could make, and who you choose to be on the board as well. Like a CEO can influence board seats. I think makes a difference too. So there's lots of different ways a CEO can make choices that uh, would be in their best interest, I think.
Well, got a few more minutes left. I want to also ask about some other research that you've been doing around sustainability and mutual funds. Do you want to share a little
Sure.
bit more about this?
Yes. So I've worked on three papers on sustainability, and the first one is, or two of them are published now, and the first paper was the one that has gathered the most attention. It's about ESG mutual funds and um, are they more likely to vote in favor of environmental and social shareholder proposals um, than non-ESG mutual funds? And the reason why we got interested in that is this whole integrity sort of issue. Do you honor your word? If you say you're an ESG mutual fund, ESG is environmental, social governance, um, then do you invest in portfolio firms that have environmental and social initiatives? And so we find that yes, they do. They tend to walk the talk. And so that was a little surprising because there's other research that shows that some of these ESG mutual funds tend to be ESG cosmetically, um, and um, and so we showed that at least in terms of voting, they do vote in favour of ES type initiatives, at least. Second paper then looks at executive compensation and finds that ESG mutual funds are more likely to support proposals that are about environmental and social initiatives, especially when uh, the issue is about being more transparent about the compensation and the ES, environmental and social compensation, rather than a wholesale redesign of the compensation. And then the third paper, which is not published yet, we're still working on, looks at what happens when mutual funds repurpose from being non-ESG to ESG. So they change their objectives, and we find an outflow of investor cash when they announce it, and an inflow of investor cash when they actually do the repurposing. So the net effect seems to be fairly low, but they change their mix of investors, which is kind of interesting, raises interesting questions about why they might do it, and yeah, so we're still working on that paper.
What attracted you to this topic? How did you get interested in it?
Partly because of colleagues. So Luann Lynch is interested in it, my ex-colleague who's now the dean at Keenan Flagger Business School, Mary Margaret Frank. They were both very interested in the topic, and I wanted to work on a paper with them. And then a former Darden student who's now a professor at Iowa State, his name's Michael Gual. He joined us, and so we had a series of papers that we sort of laid out that we wanted to work on, and it's just been a very fruitful partnership. But also, it has this theme of integrity in it, which I'm interested in. I think it goes way back to the roots of you never let your mates down, right? From Australia. So I'm a big believer in if you say you're going to do something, you follow through and you do it. And and so yeah, this idea of integrity is a theme through all the research that I do, or not all of it, but through a lot of the research that I do.
Integrity is an interesting thing to try to assess, like how
Yeah.
actually to get to the crux of it.
Yep. Yeah, and actually in the paper that had published that I talked about earlier, we can't actually call it integrity because you can't really assess someone's actual integrity. But what you can do, and this concept of behavioral integrity is really important. And behavioral integrity means how people perceive the integrity of someone else, right? And so you can measure that, um, and 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 we're able to do that by our perceptions of a CEO's integrity by looking at the over and under explanations in shareholder letters.
Couple more questions as we wrap up today. For folks who are just beginning to learn about Darden and thinking about maybe even applying in this upcoming cycle to maybe one of our programs, what's your wide Darden pitch? I know we've been sort of talking around it in different ways about the learning experience and
Yeah.
what happens to students in terms of the growth and development that they have. But for you, what's your wide Darden pitch?
I think Darden is a place where people want to learn in a way that changes how they think, not just what they know. So the school's got this deeply engaged student body. We've got the case method. We've got faculty who really do care about not only the classroom experience, but rigorous scholarship, transformational learning, and we've also got an amazing group of staff like Brett, who are genuinely committed to the mission of creating responsible leaders. And so um, I think what stands out is that students just don't sit back and absorb data passively. They're actively engaged. They're asked to uh, ask questions and listen and build on one another in class, and that's what makes the experience so powerful. Um, yeah, so that's my pitch. Change the way that you think, not just what you know.
Well, Shane, for folks who've maybe gotten interested in some of the topics today, I know we talked about CEO performance evaluation, integrity, mentioned the ESG and mutual funds, or just the work that you do around accounting and strategic costing. Any
Yeah,
books that you might recommend for people who are interested in maybe engaging with
yeah.
these topics later on?
Well, so the first book that I would recommend for a student that's coming to Darden is a book by a former president here, Jim Ryan. He had a very short book. It's called Wait What? And it's a book about asking questions. And I think that is a superpower that you can develop at Darden is asking good questions. And so that's one book that I would say. Um, then Angela Duckworth's book called Grit. It's based on academic research, and I think that talks about passion and perseverance and how it matters more than actual talent itself. And then Sean Akers' The Happiness Advantage, which basically says that it's happiness that drives productivity, not the other way around. And so you've got to find your happy place to be productive, and then the hours pass and you don't realize that you're still working. So yeah,
Well, thank you. I know you've also recommended Atomic Habits before to our
Atomic
incoming
Habits is
students. I
very
know
good.
it's
Yeah.
been a
I'm
popular one.
I'm actually reading a book at the moment called How to Get Rich in American History. And I haven't finished it yet, but it's an amazing book. It changes the way I'm thinking about personal financial management. And it's really about how you use lessons in history to change popular thinking about how individuals can enhance their personal wealth. And so I've been amazed at what I've gotten out of it. And it got recommended to me by this group chat of 15 accounting professors from around the world. We all got together over the summer and started doing predictions about the World Cup. And I finished 13th out of 15, by the way. So I'm not very good at predicting soccer outcomes. But this book was recommended, and so we're all reading it, and we're going to do a book club of accounting professors from different parts of the world. So yeah, that's going to be fun.
That's awesome. Maybe you put a little bit too much faith in the Socceroos going deep in the tournament.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the problem.
Well, Shane, thank you so much for your time. And to our attendees, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. As mentioned, recorded this conversation will be up on our podcast and Vimeo channel shortly. But so appreciate you taking some time out of your day to learn a little bit more about a faculty member here at Darden, as well as the learning experience and the overall experience as a Darden student. So thank you so much and have a wonderful weekend. Shane, thank you again.
Thanks, Brett. Thank you.
And that was my conversation with Shane Dikolli, a member of the accounting faculty here at the Darden School of Business. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at Darden, that's DARDEN, at virginia.edu. And until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.